Hello everyone, I am the Bandit Kirby. Welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of the Brewery, I will be discussing my take on a commander from the Fallout crossover, Rex Cyber-Hound. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel and no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with the logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or, you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Rex is a 2/2 artifact creature robot dog for 1 generic, 1 white, and 1 blue. It has a triggered ability that mills an opponent 2 cards while you gain 2 energy whenever it deals combat damage to that opponent. It then has a sorcery speed activated ability where you pay 2 energy to exile a creature card from your graveyard with a brain counter on it. Its final ability is a static ability where Rex has all activated abilities of all creature cards in exile with brain counters. In this sense, Rex reminds me of Marcel, only that Rex isn't limited to once per turn. There are plenty of more hoops to jump through, but that's fine because of how I built this deck. Here are some rules I gave myself to improve Rex as much as possible. 1. Include mostly creatures with free activated abilities, i.e., ones that don't require mana or tapping to activate, unless the ability is absolutely busted. 2. Activated abilities that help our cause by discarding as part of their cost or effect. That way, we can get creatures into our graveyard without self-milling. This guarding gives me way more control over what goes into my graveyard versus indiscriminately milling myself. 3rd, abilities that follow the trifecta of commander deck building: interaction, card advantage, and mana acceleration. Now that we understand my focus, let's see what I put in it. Let's start with the elephant in the room, getting energy. Without it, we can't power Rex. Modern Horizons 3 is on the horizon, pun intended, and it will bring another red, white, blue precon dedicated to energy. So this deck will definitely get some goodies and upgrades from there. However, for the moment, we still have plenty of energy cards to help out. Starting with Aether Hub, Minister of Inquiries, Thriving Turtle, Aether Swooper, Aether Theorist, Eddy-tailed Hawk, Shipwreck Moray, Sentry Bot, and Aether Tide Whale. As a bonus, the whale can self-bounce to then be recast for even more energy. In any case, these were chosen because they have an amazing ratio of casting cost to energy provided. We're essentially paying as much mana as energy. We can't just rely on Rex hitting opponents to get that energy. Most of these spells are also cheap enough where we can get energy before Rex even hits the battlefield. And also early game chump blockers. However, more than just chump blocking, we can potentially blink them to get even more energy. Eldrazi Displacer and Gilrayan Domain Protector have activated abilities that blink other creatures at instant speed. What's great about these creatures is that not only are they amazing on their own, meaning that we can just cast them and use them in the meantime, but if they're ever killed, we can just exile them with Rex and thus permanently give it their blinking ability. Gilrayan's only downside is needing to tap to activate, but the deck has ways to deal with that. In any case, blinking creatures to protect them from spot removal, in response to blocks, etc. is always a great trick. But blinking ETB creatures that give us energy is an amazing way to keep that energy flow online. The Concoction module makes it so any creature entering the battlefield gives us at least 1 energy counter. This thing does a ton of work. Not only that, but it can also bounce a creature in a pinch for just 4 mana and tapping. An opponent casts Farewell? Well, at least we can bounce our commander in response. There's also more protective effects like this in the deck, but we'll see those in a bit. Aetherworks Marvel also gives us energy, but whenever a permanent we control goes to the graveyard. The deck has its own board wipes which are amazing for a commander like Rex, but I'll discuss those later. This is also amazing to have against opponents' own board wipes. However, with chump blocking and the like, we can trade creatures for energy. Same with the fetch lands and mana accelerants in the deck. Sacrificing a fetch land will get us an energy. Same with the other mana accelerants in the deck: Wayfarer's Bauble, Navigation Orb, or Burnished Heart. If you want to be extra spicy, you can exile the heart with a brain counter and sacrifice Rex if you need the mana, but I hope you're not in the game that dire. In any case, decks need mana acceleration, so what better way than synergistic ones? Especially in a non-green deck like this one. Helios 1, Brotherhood Scribe, and Consulate Turret are more controllable energy sources since we get energy from tapping them. The Scribe is yet another creature that's great on its own, but once it's dead, we can exile it with Rex to get future value. As for the turret, it's mostly for an energy rock, to put it that way, than a pinger artifact. Alright, now that we saw how we're powering Rex's exiling ability, how do we make the most of it? Well, we already saw some useful activated ability creatures that blink and give us energy. But what about the rules I established myself when building the deck? Well, since the deck relies so heavily on Rex, let's see how we're protecting it. First up are Prognostic Sphinx and Dream Trawler for their free hexproof ability. These creatures are also just good on their own, especially Dream Trawler with that impressive text box and power toughness for that mana cost. However, once in the graveyard, they can be exiled in order to give Rex free instant speed hexproof. Well, not really free, we do have to discard a card. Oh, but what's this? I'll not only be giving Rex hexproof, but also putting yet another creature with an amazing activated ability in the graveyard, all at instant speed and for no mana? Don't mind if I do. Cephalid Ink Shrouder is even better because Rex gets Shroud and becomes unblockable. Unblockability is very important, so this card is an all-star here. Rex is the main win con, so being able to swing at an opponent unopposed is important. There are more unblockable abilities in the deck, but we'll see those soon. Adanto Vanguard, Guardian of New Benalia, and Seasoned Hollowblade are also free ways to make Rex indestructible. These cards are also amazing on their own as cheap ways to have an indestructible blocker plus free discard outlet. With the exception of Adanto Vanguard. Instead of discarding a card, you pay for a life, which is great for when you need to make Rex indestructible and either have no cards in hand or no cards you want to discard. As for other ways of dealing with Rex like Mass Sacrifice, Mass Tux, Max Exile, Max Negative Toughness, etc., Fleeting Spirit helps with that by delay blinking Rex. Notice the trend: instant speed, 0 mana ways to protect Rex, all with a discard outlet to boot. You can also pay 1 white and exile 3 cards from your graveyard to give Rex first strike, but I have never used, nor will ever use, this ability. This is here solely for the delay blink ability. Skywing Aven can also help against those global threats. The previously seen Aethertide Whale is another way, since you pay 4 energy, but that's not where we want to spend our energy. At least with this card, we can bounce Rex at instant speed for free while also discarding a card. Paying 3 is much better than paying 3 plus any commander tax. Arcanus the Omnipotent can also bounce Rex, but at the whopping cost of 4 mana. So imagine you should guess by now that it's merely an emergency use only ability, since his main purpose for being here is to tap to draw 3 cards. All at instant speed and for just tapping. Arcanus is good on his own, even paying for his mana cost, but much better when exiled with Rex, obviously. Speaking of drawing cards, Jace's Archivist, Survivor of the Unseen, and Archivist do so by tapping. Jace's Archivist is the best one though, since it's a free repeatable windfall for just 1 blue and tapping. That being said, Survivor of the Unseen is also pretty useful thanks to its cumulative upkeep cost. At the beginning of your upkeep, activate it in response to its trigger, but don't pay for it. Then you'll have it for free in your graveyard after drawing cards. Sure, it's like a weak brainstorm, but you get to do it for free and at instant speed just for tapping. At least it's a form of top deck manipulation for cards like Gallifrey Council Chamber, Meticulous Archive, and Takasia's Dig Site. These cards don't take up space in your deck and can be used to surveil away a creature you'd rather exile with Rex than eventually draw into. Takasia's Dig Site is a bit expensive to activate, but it gives you something to do if you have the extra mana. The first 2 only surveil 1 when entering the battlefield, but that's still good enough for lands that don't take up spell slots. Speaking of lands, Walking Atlas and Patron of the Moon help us accelerate our mana even further. Walking Atlas is good on its own, but when exiled with Rex is another tap effect that we have to keep in mind of. Patron of the Moon doesn't have that limitation, costing only 1 generic mana to drop 2 tapped lands from our hand onto the battlefield at instant speed. I love this card here. Another card that I love here is Kil'jaeden Royal Guard. This deck is essentially putting all its eggs in one basket, which is Rex, so we're susceptible to getting overrun by swarm decks. However, we can just tap this to redirect all damage from unblocked creatures to it. Once it's dead, we can exile with Rex, and then we have all that damage redirected to Rex, who won't die by the way, if it also exiled a creature that can make it indestructible. This way, we're essentially immune to creature-based decks. Haaz the Shieldmate fills a similar role, but requires 1 white mana each time. That being said, we can prevent direct damage effects, not just combat damage. We do have to pay double white during our upkeep or else we have to sacrifice it. That's actually a bonus since we can then exile it with Rex and have the ability perpetually on it. As for our own interaction, I settled on Avenger Endal, Devout Witness, Intrepid Hero, Mangara of Corondor, Ovinomancer, Magus of the Disc, and Magetta the Lion. The Spell Shapers require mana, tapping, and discarding cards to activate, but that's fine since we're destroying things as well as putting cards in our yard for Rex. Exiling Magetta the Lion is especially oppressive since it turns any 2 cards in our hand into Wrath of God. all while keeping Rex in play, regardless if he's indestructible or not. Magetta is absolutely insane here. Same with Magus of the Disc. Unfortunately, it does destroy itself. However, if Rex exiled it along with a way to become indestructible, you can consistently wipe the entire board apart from planeswalkers and battles. And lands. This is incredibly oppressive though, so keep that in mind. Intrepid Hero is amazing on its own, but even better on Rex. Avenomancer is great because you can just let it die when it enters the battlefield. Then it becomes a way to not only destroy any creature, but also bounce Rex, essentially fulfilling two roles at once. Mangara requires some finessing though. If exiled with Rex, we need to activate its ability, but maintain priority with it on the stack. We then need to either blink or bounce Rex so that it doesn't get exiled along with the target. So once you have that set up, you can essentially consistently exile whatever you want, especially if you're able to constantly untap Rex. Enter the best cards in the deck: Pure Side Marrow, Horseshoe Crab, and Solidum. There are plenty of more untappers to run, but I settled on these since they only require 1 mana to activate. These make Rex so much more oppressive, especially with the Mangara example. In response to the ability on the stack, untap Rex as many times as you can, each time activating it to exile something. Then, in response to the final trigger, bounce it or blink it. Now you just exiled a ton of permanents. Super busted. However, these untap abilities are just overall amazing on their own. Whether Rex had the ability of Arcanist, Walking Atlas, Kil'jaeden Royal Guard, Intrepid Hero, etc. Continuing on with the interaction package, I'm running Snow Fortress, Steel Hellkite, and Azorius Guildmage. For all those loyal fans of the channel, you know I love my obscure cards. Nothing adds more flavor to a deck build than tons of cards your opponents have to ask you what the hell they are and what you're running. And as seen so far, this deck has no shortage of them. Enter Snow Fortress. For 3 mana, you deal 1 damage to target non-flying creature attacking you. Now, that seems pretty steep, but if Rex had Death Touch, you can snipe any attacker for 3 mana. To be fair, this is just a bonus though. The real reason for running this wall here is because you can pump Rex for just 1 generic mana each time. This is the cheapest and easiest way as of recording this video to give Rex +1/+0 at instant speed. This Fire Breathing is amazing to activate in response to dealing combat damage to a player, since it adds up much faster, solidifying that win. Same with Steel Hellkite. You have to pay twice as much, but you get the bonus effect of wiping a lot of their board for just X. This absolutely Rex token decks for free, since you can just pay 0. Absolutely busted. Oh, and it also works on its own. The Guildmage doesn't have any pump effects on it, but it does round out the interaction package. For 3 mana you can tap a creature, which is pretty steep. However, its second ability is where it's at. For 2 and a blue you can counter target activated ability. You'd be surprised how many opponents don't see that coming, feeling that once they have a permanent in play, counter magic is moot. Not to Azorius Guildmage, and not to Rex when it exiled it with a brain counter. On the topic of pumping though, Phyrexian Devourer is the game ender. Once Rex gets through, in response to damage, just exile enough cards from the top of your library to make Rex big enough to kill off that opponent. Then, next time it gets through, another opponent bites the dust. What's important to keep in mind is that Rex only has activated abilities of exiled cards with a brain counter, so you do not have to sacrifice it when it gets too big, since it's not a part of the activation ability, it's a triggered ability. Alright, so we've already seen a handful of creatures with multiple abilities on them. These aren't the only ones though. Brightling, Morphling, and Aetherling are glorious here. Rex is a 2/2, so I don't really use the Flowstone type abilities until it's at least much larger in case you can end an opponent. That being said, their main focus is their colored abilities. Brightling gives Vigilance and Lifelink either for 1 white, and it has yet another bounce effect to protect Rex. Absolutely crazy. Morphling is another amazing one, providing yet another untap ability, another Shroud ability, and an Evasion ability. Aetherling rounds them out with another protective effect via delayed blinking, and another evasive ability with outright unblockability. I always love these creatures, and even more so in a deck like this one. It's a shame that Greater Morphling is a silver bordered card, but that's understandable since it has abilities that change its expansion symbol and artist. If not for those 2 abilities, this would be a non-acorn stamped black bordered card, but I digress. In any case, if your playgroup is okay with running it, considering that it's incredibly tame by uncard standards, it's a super fun inclusion in your Rex deck. The final activated ability creatures in the deck are Argivian Avenger and Jodas Avenger, yet more sources for multiple effects. These are instant speed ways of giving Rex useful keywords in exchange for its power and toughness. With Rex being a 2/2 by default, you might only be able to activate these abilities only once. But that's fine because Argivian Avenger is a source of Death Touch and Haste, both of which are amazing, especially Haste when we recast or get Rex back from exile, and Joda's Avenger gives double strike, doubling Rex's combat damage trigger. It can also give him Shadow in order for him to get through, since almost no one will be running creatures with Shadow in your commander pod. It can also give protection from red in a pinch for those pesky damage-based board wipes like Blasphemous Act, Earthquake, etc. The rest of the deck is just cards to help support these strategies, since giving Rex as many activated abilities as possible is the goal of the deck. Illusionist Bracers is an amazing card since we can exile 2 creatures at once with 1 activation, plus we can double any activated ability we put on Rex. Definitely an all-star in the deck. Sometimes it can get overwhelming when copying untap abilities, since you can respond to the original after the copy resolved, allowing you to tap Rex down before it getting untapped the second time. While this might seem complicated, it's fun for a player such as myself. Speaking of untapping, Minamo School at Water's Edge is included for obvious reasons. It doesn't take up a slot in the deck, enters untapped, and can be tapped for blue mana. There's a reason this card is so expensive. That being said, you can build this deck with almost every card except the most expensive ones with minimal financial investment. So you can omit this one if you don't already have it. Access Tunnel and Rogue's Passage are more amazing lands in the deck that are actually budget. Rex doesn't need to deal combat damage for the deck to generate energy, but we do want to win, and Rex dealing 21 commander damage is a great way to go about it. Just remember to pump it after you made it unblockable with Access Tunnel. Gaia Reach, Sanitarium, and War Room are some more useful lands in the deck for cheap. The Sanitarium in particular because it forces the table to loot for 1, which can disrupt opponents while almost always helping us, since we might want to discard a creature to then exile later with Rex. That being said, cards like Drown in Dreams and Stroke of Genius are still included because we can't just rely on synergistic card draw effects in the deck. Being able to sink all of our mana at the end of the turn before ours to draw X cards is nothing to scoff at. As a bonus, we can also mill ourselves for twice X with Drown in Dreams, or an opponent if we want to try and steal some of their creatures. Speaking of, Maddening Cacophony is the only pure mill opponent card in the deck. That's because for only 6 mana we mill each opponent for half of their library. This gives us so many options for better creatures with activated abilities to steal. The goal of the deck isn't to mill opponents and exile their creatures, but it's fine enough to have a single card here for that, especially the best one for the job. Pariah Shield is such an amazing card in this deck that might be slept over. If we have free instant speed ways to give Rex Indestructible, Shroud, Hexproof, etc., then having it equipped with Pariah Shield means we have an amazing Pillow Fort type protective effect while we do all of our shenanigans. Other ways to prevent opponents from playing include Counterspell and Mana Drain for counter magic, with Generous Gift and Stroke of Midnight for single target removal, and Cyclonic Rift, Supreme Verdict, Wrath of God, and Ondu Inversion for board wipes. These destroy all board wipes that don't hurt us that much because we can then just exile those creatures from our graveyard or opponents' graveyards with Rex. What does hurt us is opponents exiling graveyards, so make sure you're exiling creatures the moment you get them in your graveyard, in order to make that window of opportunity as small as possible for opponents. Mystic Sanctuary is included to top deck any of these spells as well as the previously mentioned ones, and Soul Ring is, well, self-explanatory. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. Apart from all the previously mentioned lands, the deck is running Glacial Floodplain, Hallowed Fountain, Idyllic Beachfront, Irrigated Farmland, Prairie Stream, Sea of Clouds, Deserted Beach, Command Tower, and Ancient Tomb, as well as 3 of each basic land for the basic land ramp effects in the deck, and because you should just be running basics in your decks anyways. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Rex. One of my goals with this deck was to try and include as many obscure and unknown cards as possible in it, while still keeping the deck viable, as well as including as many creatures with multiple abilities as possible, especially if the act of even activating the ability was beneficial, such as providing a free discard outlet, all while making the deck viable to win games in casual pods with obscure and weird cards. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Medic Kirby, and happy brewing.